So if you just joined in, we're going to do a chant in just a minute or so, and you'll find it in the Common Ground Chant book on page 26, the 5 subjects for frequent recollection. And that link is on your YouTube page. Down in the comments, you can click on that and get it in front of you for just the opening minutes. And then after we do this chant, we'll sit together for about 35 minutes. And the chant this morning, the 5 subjects for frequent recollection, especially relevant for the talk today, setting good in motion, that I'll do after the sit, and just this integration of what life teaches us. Life teaches us in Buddhist terms the reality of karma, that intention matters, that we're not just simply helpless, but the intentions through which, or the motivations through which we live our lives and make our choices and relate to our experience, it matters. And we've been talking about this for some time. And this chant, especially the last reflection of these 5, really speak to the teaching on karma. Or here it's translated, or not translated, but written as kama, which is the Pali version of the Sanskrit word karma, which means intentional actions. Thoughts done with intention, words spoken with intention, and actions or deeds out there in the world done with intention. That's what karma is. And then the fruits of karma, or the tendencies that grow because of how we're thinking, speaking, and acting with intention, laying down things. So in any case, let's do this chant, this 5 subjects for frequent recollection on page 26 to begin. I am the owner, I am of the nature to age. I have not gone beyond aging. I am of the nature to sicken. I have not gone beyond sickness. I am of the nature to die. I have not gone beyond dying. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. Thus we should frequently recollect. And take some time, settle into a comfortable posture for the meditation time now. And one of the first things that we can actually do, just sitting here in the middle of our life together, all of us in our home spaces, we can choose to pay attention as we're listening to the body and making adjustments. We can choose to pay attention to the quality of belonging. This, however, it might be quite faint for some of you, might be obvious for others, but let's choose to pay attention to this sense of belonging. I belong here in my life. I belong here in this moment. I belong here with this sensitivity, this awareness, these qualities of the heart that are here now, this beating heart, this breathing lungs, this body. So we're noticing how healing and wholesome it is to keep in mind the sense of belonging, not living in opposition with the reality the way it is right now. And so in this sense, we're not looking towards some optimistic, hopeful view. We're not dwelling in some pessimistic, negative view. We're taking refuge in a deeply realistic, honest, grounded view. Honey, it's like this now. Honestly, there is this heart and mind, this sensitive heart. There is this knowing mind. There is this sensitive body. And all this is moving here in the present moment. And I recognize the wholesomeness of saying yes to this life as it actually is right now. So often we use the word intimacy, belonging, intimacy, openness or opening. And with each ordinary inhalation, let that ordinary in-breath be a reminder of how wholesome and healing it is to say yes to the conditions of this heart, mind, and body. This honest and realistic connecting with the activity of the body and the mind. Breathing in, willing to be intimate, and breathing out this willingness to allow, to explore the possibility of non-control, non-attachment, letting go, allowing, even the letting go of any need for certainty, any need to be able to explain or define things. Breathing in, willing to be intimate, open. Breathing out, allowing, releasing, exploring if we can put down all the load, not consciously holding anything. And if you need a verbal reminder, you could just repeat silently in your heart simple words like the word intimacy or openness as you breathe in, and the word releasing or allowing as you breathe out. But you can be creative, just keep it simple. Find a phrase or word that's helpful. Of course, many of you won't be helpful to use a word, so just do the practice in silence. So generally we rely on the experience of embodiment, this relatively concrete experience of the body sitting, breathing body, feeling body. So breathing in, willing to be intimate with embodiment. Breathing out, willing to let everything go, allowing, releasing, letting everything move, letting everything be. And this is also true when distraction arises. Breathing in, willing to be intimate, to feel what's been set in motion with this distraction, this thinking. Exhaling, allowing, releasing, letting the thought, letting the drama cease on its own. So now let's continue in silence. So for this sit today, let's allow it to be a contemplation on these two related ways of showing up, of engaging the moment. Really trusting this possibility of intimacy as we breathe in, trusting this real possibility of letting go, letting be as we exhale. And of course, bringing the two together as just a way of showing up in life here with the relative simplicity of our meditation time. So we can better live the whole day this way, being intimate, really trusting the letting go, the allowing everything to be in motion, not fixed, not needing to be grasped in any way. And we can always start over. Breathing in, learning something about being intimate, if we can. Breathing out, learning something about letting things be, or allowing as we breathe out. And again, for the last few minutes, using this formal meditation time to contemplate the direct experience of being intimate, being open, and the direct experience of non-attachment, the letting things be, the allowing. So just see what can be learned as you explore with the in-breath, possibility of being more fully intimate and open. And with each out-breath, exploring the possibility of non-attachment, what that might feel and look like in this moment, letting things be. And how the two support each other. And we're even letting go of things seeming to be the way we think they are, or any fixed notions. Even that can be let go of. Who knows? And then taking your time as you open the eyes and adjust the body, move around a little bit. And again, it's really nice to be with everybody this morning. I'm giving this talk from New Jersey, where my mother-in-law lives. Wynn and I are here helping to take care of Wynn's mother. I'll be leaving again tomorrow back to Minneapolis. And the title of the talk discussion this morning is on setting good in motion. And it's such a powerful counterweight when things are difficult, when things are complex. There's this ordinary, in a way, unavoidable stress response. A lot of you have heard this. And, we tend to freeze when things are overwhelming. We tend to get angry and frustrated and strike out. So fight and flight. We also tend to, there are other sort of responses, including the response to, this is a newer one, to run away. So we have flight and we have freeze and we have fight, but there's also this follow as a fourth sort of stress response where we're like looking for somebody to tell me what to do, or looking towards someone who seems to know what they're talking about, pretending at least to know what they're talking about. And we gravitate as a way to deal with the stress, the confusion, the uncertainty, the exposure in our lives. And then we get this teaching that I've been bringing up these last few weeks on karma, that intentional actions, including actions of thought, actions of speech, as well as those actions out in the world, they matter. And that chant we did, it's really about the ownership of action. And I've been also mentioning off and on how easily misunderstood the Buddhist teachings on karma, because it can seem that, when we hear the teachings on karma, that somehow I own, like the fruit of my actions is my privilege. I have rights to my health. I have rights to my power. I have rights to my location in culture, the relative privilege, especially me personally as a white male, and an educated white male, a healthy, able-bodied white male. There's a lot of power and privilege just in that. And we can use the Buddhist teachings on karma to, in a sense, say that, oh, I see what the Buddha is saying is I have this because I deserve it. But really, the teaching on karma isn't that. It's how right now I'm relating to my relative privilege, or how I'm relating to my discomfort, or how I'm relating to the irritation I feel about this person, or how I'm relating to society, or how I'm relating to this and that matters, that plants seeds. Because there are many, 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 many causes and conditions that make things the way that they are. It's all natural, but it's quite complex. So to somehow construct a personal idea of ownership, like I deserve the bad stuff that's happening to me, or I deserve the good stuff that's happening to me, that is not Buddhism. Or in Buddhism, in the Buddhist teachings, that would be considered not helpful, unwise, unskillful, to be projecting self on these circumstances, right? So karma is really a way, it really speaks, it's illuminating this moment-to-moment dynamic, this actual, real dynamic of being a human being, and how, as I mentioned the title of the talk, how to set good in motion. So given that we have this dynamic existence, right, how do we set something good in motion? How do we set well-being for myself and others? How do we set in motion healing for myself and others? It's not a question of like, do we deserve this moment of being a human being? We have this moment. It's already here. We have this body and mind. We have this life, this existence, and it's quite dynamic. And the Buddha illuminates, with the teachings, that the relevant thing about this dynamic of being human is that it matters how I'm relating. Intention, motivation, the quality of my heart matters. And I can, in terms of how I'm relating, I can set in motion more harm for myself and others, or I can set in motion healing. And that pointing out, that instruction, is really the counterweight towards pessimism and helplessness and giving up. But it also helps us with this sense of, mastery or meritocracy or competence, where I should be able to control things. Like if I just got my act together, I should really be able to make things the way that I want them to be. Because karma, the teaching on karma, it both invites this full and wholehearted engagement, but it also helps us understand the limitations. Like we have very much a right, like it's skillful for us to see that it matters how I'm relating right now. But it also helps us understand that, like, if bad stuff is happening to me, to interpret that as some personal failure, or I must have done something bad, or I'm doing something bad, is to overinterpret what the Buddha is saying. And it's nice, in the myths or legends from the time of the Buddha that this is made really clear. Like one of the Buddha's chief disciples, fully awakened person, as the stories go, Moggallana was this person's name, the second chief disciple. So there's Sariputta and then Moggallana. And evidently, in the tradition, Moggallana had a terrible, terrible death. Somehow, I forget if they were robbers or what, but just terribly beaten. And then they are lying there totally beaten up by these bad folks, not wanting to die so that they had the terrible karma. Again, I'm not going to own this story. So he kept himself alive with his, powerful mind and intention out of compassion for the folks that beat him up. And this happened several times until he realized there was no way out and allowed the dying process to happen. So, this is a pretty, like, objectively speaking, ordinarily speaking, this is a pretty miserable way to die, to be beaten up several times and to be just lying there, probably in a lot of pain, physical pain, and letting the dying process take its way. So it's really useful, though, to have it as a story, because we might otherwise think that if I really got my act together like Moggallana, and had a teacher like the Buddha and really did my practice well and uprooted greed, anger, and delusion from my heart, I'd have one of those peaceful deaths, where I'm in full samadhi, my lotus pose sitting up, my mind in a beautiful state of universal loving kindness. And only then, when my mind was totally absorbed in love in all directions, would the body cease to function and the dying process would unfold. And then who knows what happens next. But, that's kind of the romantic version, or, in more mundane sense, I just want to die in my sleep, right? And I don't want to really be there when it happens. And that's, in ordinary terms, that's often considered a good death, when there's not a lot of violence or a lot of pain or even a lot of consciousness. But there are many, many, many things in motion that might determine our particular cause of death. And, we have this very deep habit of projecting self on everything. We think, like, when the weather's bad, it somehow is personal, or if I get cancer, it's somehow personal, or if I'm wealthy, or if I have success, or, oh, I deserve it. But that's not the teaching of karma. That's ignorance. That's imputing self-view on everything. That's really the very definition in the Buddhist teachings of ignorance, is projecting or imputing a self-view on what is actually an impersonal and complex, interdependent unfolding. So again, then, the karma that is really a powerful teaching, but it's a teaching for the present moment dynamic. But our mind wants to have some meaning I can bank on, like turn it into an ideology or even a religion. Okay, this is what's true and I'm going to hold to it. But it's really, karma is really a way to help illuminate the present moment, which is an unfolding dynamic, and to get more and more intimate so that the heart can let go of what can be let go of. And what are we letting go of? We're only letting go, we're only renouncing the way the mind relates that sets in motion suffering for myself and others. That's really important to hear. Nobody's taken away our ice cream. Nobody's taking away our privilege. Nobody's going to take away our health. Those things will come and go according to this complex and wild, force of causality, causes and conditions. But it isn't a moral thing when, we happen to be a place where there's a forest fire, or a place where there's a recession, or there's a place living in a place where there's a lot of economic, viability, and people can earn a living relatively easily. Right? These things that are in motion are expressing innumerable causes and conditions. And the interesting thing about the teachings on karma is to kind of illuminate this very particular window. Okay, this dance is playing itself out right now in this moment. How can I show up right now in this moment in a way where I'm planting seeds of release, seeds of happiness, seeds of well-being, and not taking it away from anyone? Because to the degree we understand the potency of our intention, like how I'm relating, how I'm sort of, in a sense, choosing to take responsibility for this wild dynamic, this wild dance of my life, I realize everybody else is in the same boat. And that's really the birth of kindness, this goodwill, realizing that there's so much emotion, and all of that, most of what's emotion is, in a sense, not in our control. But there is a way to participate, which is to illuminate this present moment by moment dynamic of karma, like how the intentional way I'm showing up and understanding and relating and responding leaves an imprint in my heart, and then in the wider sense, leaves an imprint or impression on the collective world. We're shaping the world moment by moment, just in the same way we're shaping our heart moment by moment. We're contributing, or we're, in a sense, stealing, like getting in the way of our happiness and the happiness of others. And so because we sense that with practice, we really want to start showing up. Okay, this matters. And that's why we value, a lot of times people misunderstand the importance of putting aside 10 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour every day to train the mind to be vibrantly clear, stable, and continuously present. But it's because we want to do this dance, our wild interactions with each other and earning our living and dealing with power struggles and trying to make the world a more just place. It matters how we're relating. It matters what we're in denial of and not paying attention to. All of that matters. So there's really no way we can sense the skillfulness or unskillfulness of our habits unless we have cultivated some stability of awareness. This is what really helps. Win Fricke, my partner and founder of Common Ground, one of our Dharma teachers at the center, we were talking this morning. We've been off and on talking generally about meritocracy, and one of the op-ed writers in the New York Times, Ross, I'm not sure how he pronounces his last name, begins with a D. Anyway, he wrote an article about white fragility and meritocracy, and I thought it was an interesting article for sure. But there's generally this sense of achievement. It's part of our culture. People might say it's like part of whiteness because our culture is dominated by what people call whiteness, this European and this sort of culture of domination. And it's not, we don't say that, like I'm always, feel like I have to explain myself when I use a word like whiteness or a phrase like white supremacy. It's not about shaming ourselves myself as a white person, although that may be my response when I hear that word or that phrase, but really helping to illuminate something that maybe I'm not seeing so well, right? And then one of the things we want to see about our cultural conditioning is like how it's related, like, because it gets internalized, what we get from our parents, what we get from our culture, it just becomes part of the way our psychology works and perceives and thinks and views things. It really gets ossified as our character. And then if we don't find a way, a provocative way usually, to illuminate it, we're kind of destined just to live it out. And there isn't somebody immune from whiteness, so we might use that phrase, but it's not like recent immigrants or people who've been marginalized, like Black people. Everybody gets infected or contaminated by our culture. I mean, in different ways, dependent, but we're all affected. We all have this incentive to illuminate it and name it and see how it's working here in my heart. And so one of these things that's getting mentioned more and more, and I find really valuable, is to even look at something that goes mostly unquestioned around meritocracy. Some belief that the way culture, the way society and the economy and other systems in our culture should operate is that we should assess people who are particularly skilled, and they should be given the resources and the privilege of running and having power, right? So that how we distribute responsibility and power should somehow be based on an assessment of who has the skills to carry that out. And that sounds kind of reasonable, and it is on some levels. It does make sense, that you want people who know what they're doing to be doing surgery on you. You don't want it to be like a random thing where you randomly select somebody, from the town to do your heart surgery. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But there's some shadows to these ideas of meritocracy and competence. And it relates, I think, too, to how motivation works and how we understand karma, like intention. Because as long as we think that happiness comes from achievement and mastery and success, then you see, we're in a world where everybody else is going to be thinking that same way. So with whatever good fortune or privilege that they have, they're going to be rallying whatever resources they have to achieve, to accomplish, to compete, to be better than you and me and others, right? And then that's what we're doing. And where does that lead, right? To this sort of cult of competence, cult of competition. And again, I'm not saying that there's an obvious alternative, but I do feel it's really important as people who are interested in uncovering the deeper roots of suffering and injustice, and also uncovering the deeper roots of freedom and justice and release and love, right? That we do this work at looking how our hearts have been infected. Because there's really no way we're going to set good in motion, plant the seeds for greater justice in our world and greater ease and love in our hearts without illuminating what makes us tick. And generally what we often see is like we're all kind of desperate for that recognition and the juice that we get from achievement and accomplishment and attainment and winning at competition, being seen, being recognized, having power. And then when we lose out in that rat race, then we want to give up on it. And then we tend, like, our achievement orientation then gets oriented around knocking down the achievement, like belittling or, doubting or hating the people who are having success, wanting to get out. And the Buddha talks about this when he talks about the three kinds of craving, like craving for a nice experience, often just to distract yourself from the pain in our life, like, I want a funny TV show, or I want more ice cream, or, whatever it might be. And the craving to become somebody, this is that, meritocracy, achievement, rat race. And then the third kind of craving is craving to be done with it all. I'm tired of chasing sense pleasures. There's very few things as unpleasant as looking for an interesting TV show or a movie, having already for so many days looked for an entertaining TV show or movie, and pretty sure you're not going to find something, every once in a while, the entertainment industry throws us a bone, and there's a relatively well-written, entertaining, not so unwholesome movie or TV show. But how often and how long does that last? One. And second, how many frustrating moments of searching and hoping is required to stumble upon one every once in a long while? And I'm painting, being a little bit funny in how I'm painting this picture, but I think most of you probably get the quiet desperation not so far beneath a lot of our sense pursuits. And so that's how the Buddha describes the kind of how hunger of craving works. Hunger for sense experience that's pleasant, which sets up this often unacknowledged fear of pain, unpleasant experience. The hunger for achievement, and the hunger to be done with all of that hunger. Even that hunger to be done with all that hungering is as stressful as hungering to be on the achievement, the rat race, or the hunger to find another sense pleasure that's going to distract me from how stressful it is to need another interesting sense experience. So this is our, this is how we're kind of trapped in life. And then what's the alternative? Well, the alternative is to honestly acknowledge, because this is how we start getting real. And we do this, as the Buddha says very clearly, we do this in terms of analyzing in real time with awareness the external world, the outer world, as well as analyzing in this mindful way, this with the sensitivity of our heart, this internal world. Right? So we're observing these forces of craving for sense pleasure, craving for achievement, getting to the top of the heap, craving to give up, to not, like some kind of wanting to get out, wanting to tear it down, not tear it down in a creative, productive way. I mean, because, that's just part of any sort of engagement where, when you're inspired to make things better, there's going to be part of that will be the act of destruction, of letting something die or helping something die so something new can be reborn. What I'm talking about, this craving for non-becoming, as it's translated in the Buddhist tradition, this craving for non-becoming is really thinking that here I am with a life, with a mind and a body, but not wanting to be alive with a mind and body, not wanting to really own the karma of being here. But here I am. So you see, it's a real disconnect, not acknowledging the reality. I do have a sensitive heart. I do have a body, as however it might function, right? And as long as this body and mind are working, the kind of yes to my life is what leads toward in the direction of well-being, not hating my embodiment or not giving up on my embodiment, but acknowledging I have this embodiment. May not be the embodiment I want, the body I want, the life I want, the location I want, but it is the life that I have. One way I think about this is I think it's a powerful reflection for us. I bring this up at some frequency. If we were to run into a sincere younger adult and who really turned to us as a mentor, as somebody they sense has been paying attention in life, and they asked us, hey, what do you do with this thing called life? What am I supposed to do? What actually matters? What actually leads in the direction that's helpful for me and helpful for others? How do I actually authentically set good in motion? What would we say to that person? Even, presume now you have some time to be reflective. And the last thing you want to do is put out some platitude or some new agey thing you read in a book, but you haven't really contemplated to see if it's actually true in your experience. But in terms of our actual lived experience, what helps set good in motion? And this is this distillation. It really is, the first part of wisdom is knowing that my life matters. There's something that can be done with this existence that's better than giving up, better than just pursuing one, however feeble I might be at it, pursuing some pleasant experience or avoiding unpleasant, and better than trying to get to the top of the heap and becoming somebody at the expense of somebody else, which is always how it works in this meritocratic system that we have. And it's not that achievement is bad. It's like choosing not to achieve is just achievement by your own sort of standard. Like, I'm too cool to want to, get through medical school, or I'm too cool to want to have to earn a lot of money. Well, that's your heap that you gotten to the top of. You're one of those cool people that doesn't need to be rich. How cool is that? And then within your circle, and you may be your only person in your circle, but then you get your status that you give yourself for having achieved what you think matters. So this way of becoming and non-becoming and endlessly thinking that some sense experience is going to make a difference in the end is just a way of really learning our lesson in life. How can we set good, real healing, real justice, real well-being, emotion for ourselves and for others? And don't feel like you have to put an answer to that question, because it's more about living the question. Well, let me see, because I got my heart, I have this sensitive heart, I have my life, my moment by moment existence. So let me just see, because setting good in motion we should be able to directly, immediately sense what's being set in motion, because it's getting set in motion here, in the sense that this sensitive heart can sense it. My well-being, the well-being of those around me. Just like, does anybody have any doubt that when I set in motion a lot of internal pain, emotional pain, psychological conflict, moral conflict in my own heart and the world around me, does anybody claim that I'm not going to be sensitive, or we're not sensitive to the harm that we set in motion at times? Sure we are. And we feel, if we're willing to be somewhat sensitive, if I've been really unskillful, I'll feel it. I'll feel it in my body. I'll feel it in my sensitive heart. I'll notice how my mind's been affected. I might sense it in the people around me, like they don't want to be with me. They don't trust me as much, right? That they're causing me harm as a way of dealing with their pain that I caused them. So if we can sense being unskillful, we can also sense being skillful. And this is, the whole point of saying this is that it really should be inspiring to us, that we're not just helpless, that it really matters. And it doesn't mean that our world will immediately turn around in terms of good fortune or the weather or the wealth or people loving me. Because a lot of what's moving in our lives has causes that we're not going to be affecting, right? And the way the Buddha talks about this is with a really powerful simile. I think if you search for the simile of the salt crystal, you might get the discourse, the sutta, where the Buddha's sharing this powerful simile. But what he's saying, it's this image that if you take a big block of salt, a big salt crystal, and you put it in a little bit of water, like a pint of water, that pint of water is going to be really, really salty, and not really useful in terms of being able to drink it. But if you have Lake Superior and you put that same salt crystal in Lake Superior, you're not going to notice the saltiness. And it's the same way in terms of understanding other aspects of causes and conditions, like bad weather or people beating us up or other terrible or beautiful things that might happen to us. If we're like the vastness of Lake Superior, those unavoidable positive and so-called negative experiences, the heart will remain alive and vibrant and spacious even when difficult experience shows up, even when beautiful, like or successful experience shows up. It doesn't shake, doesn't disturb the heart. The heart isn't confused by success or pleasantness, and it isn't confused by pain and failure. And that's really that's the karmic fruit we're attempting to set in motion. You can go ahead as long as anybody wants to and try to set in motion the success of wealth or the success of being praised or loved or the success of health or these ordinary things we tend to strive for. No one will stop us. That's what most of the world is doing. And there's nothing wrong, and I continue to do that. We all continue to do that. It's just a question of understanding the limitations of those efforts to set all that in motion. So there's what else we'd like to set in motion is the vastness of the heart that isn't shaken. And there's a really powerful example of this that I've read recently. Doug McGill, a teacher down in Rochester, sent me the transcription. A lot of you know Cornel West. He's one of our great, philosophers and public intellectuals, pundits, and professor. I think currently he's teaching at Harvard. Maybe he's an emeritus professor from Princeton, and I think he taught for a while at Union Theological Seminary in New York City. A longtime activist, African-American man. But he was being interviewed by Anderson Cooper from CNN after the memorial service for George Floyd, and just talking about how just the pain of what that murder of George Floyd represented. And then Cornel West is a real religious person. He just imbibes that sort of energy of love, I think, religious love or universal love. He starts, he goes on this beautiful little riff, starting about, from this point of being broken by the murder of George Floyd, and then talking about how much love he saw at the memorial service. And then I'll just read a little bit of what he said. This is a grand gift to the world, right from the bowels of the American empire that has enslaved Jim Crow, Jane Crow, lynched them, yet we are still dishing out this love. White supremacy may make being black a crime, but we refuse to get down in the gutter. we're going to go down swinging like Ella Fitzgerald and Muhammad Ali in the name of love and justice. And Anderson Cooper started to tear up, and then he went on and said, "We cry because we care, my brother. We are concerned. We cry because we aren't numb on the inside. We don't have a chillness of soul." And I think in Buddhist terms, that chillness of soul would be resorting to ways of being that in our heart we know don't work, like the endless pursuit of pleasant sense experience, or the endless pursuit of getting to the top of the heap, trying to become, whatever we're trying to become, or the endless pursuit of trying to get out of this. We don't have that chillness of soul. We cry because we connect. But then we must have a vision that includes all of us. We must have an analysis of power that's honest. So I really like this because I think it really aligns with the Dharma. Like, we actually have to see things realistically, deeply, clearly, with great breadth as they are. We have to see clearly. He goes on, he says, we always need to connect police power and street crimes with White House power and Wall Street crimes. We need to honestly analyze power in terms of greed, especially at the top. And then the greed in us, the gangster in us, because we are all wrestling with this day to day, and that's why we need each other. Courage and fortitude are what's necessary. They are the backbone. And this is the patience. Like, we don't like this moment-to-moment analysis of power. I think that's what we were talking about today in terms of understanding karma in the intimacy of the present moment. Okay, this is how it is. This is how the heart's relating. And this is what I sense is getting set in motion. I'm causing harm to myself and others. I'm setting in motion peace for myself and others, right? This sort of courage and fortitude. And then the last statement here from Cornell West. We don't need lukewarm folk. We don't need summer soldiers. We need all-season love warriors. I love that. We need all-season love warriors. And the power for that really comes out of the confidence of that kind of all-season love warriors. It really comes out of the confidence that arises in our heart when we see the way it is, when we see karma, like, oh, when I relate with this love, it's healing for myself and others. When I relate with hate, it's killing me and it's killing others. When I close my heart, there are consequences to me and others. When I let the heart open, however scary that is, even if it's just a little, it's in the direction of healing. And this creativity, I'll just give an example of this. I had this great conversation with James Perez, one of the early teachers at Spirit Rock and just one of the longtime Dharma teachers in our community, wonderful activist too, besides being a Dharma teacher. And James, was just doing this beautiful little conversation with me. I was really getting inspired about like how Dharma is really an activist, should be understood as an activist teaching. And he gave this example of Buddhadasa, some of you know, is a famous Thai Buddhist monk, died maybe in the 90s, an important teacher of a lot of the elders in our Western tradition of insight meditation, Vipassana tradition here in the West. And when they were cutting down the trees, in Buddhism, the monks, they're supposed to sort of stand apart, like that's sort of the etiquette. But he would ordain trees. I mean, talk about a creative response to the cutting down of the forests, because the lumber companies and the people cutting down the trees, they had a deep respect for the monks and nuns, well, mostly the monks, but patriarchy. Anyway, so he would put, ordained the trees. I don't know if he like wrapped a robe around the trees or something like that, but basically the local folks who were cutting the trees wouldn't touch them because they were sort of part of the Sangha. So he had these sort of creative ways of responding. And I think those creative ways of love and healing, they can be quite fierce and strong and clever, but most importantly, functional and like in the direction of healing. And I think that's what we really need, is that creativity that comes from that clear seeing of what's getting set in motion in our hearts and then in the wider world. We really have to unpack this